They have some kind of thing with
They're
YouTube
saying,
where
come back, come back.
they come back.
You know,
Oh, it's live on YouTube again, right?
and it's another.
I think we're coming back.
But wait. I need to figure out if it's a new video altogether or if it's the same chat.
It's the same chat. I can see it.
Yeah, I'm still in the.
Yeah, we back.
We are back.
Yes,
Sweet.
we back.
We have the technology.
Okay,
Woohoo!
good deal.
That was weird.
I don't know. I don't know if it's my computer, if I need a faster
your
processing computer or what. But yes, okay, so let's wind up here. So, okay, so sorry guys, thanks for
Waiting.
yes, for waiting. Okay, so point number 5, difficulty experiencing moderation. So and it comes in a wide variety of ways. So with the body, with thinking, with behavior, and with feelings. And so with the body, it might be a person's dress. They're either overly sexy or they're overly kind of frumpy. They're
Constrained.
baggy clothes, trying to hide kind of stuff. They might be really overweight or really thin. I would say overly seductive or overly frumpy as well. Thinking
quiet and loud.
Yeah, thinking tends to be either black or white, or I guess thinking in general tends to be black or white. Behavior tends to be extremes, like trusting everyone or trusting no one, disciplining their children severely or not at all, with boundaries, building fortresses or no boundaries whatsoever. So it's very extreme.
You know, I also thought that was extreme in my case when I would either not be able to make a decision at all or be very impulsive and just making decision and going with it.
That's a great.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree and can relate. Okay, let's see, feelings. So feeling little to no emotions or explosive or agonizing ones. And
I felt that dating a codependent person or being in a relationship with a codependent person, I said there's like two extreme. You either like a dating and highly explosive material or a freaking zombie, so disconnected from everything. And I was thinking like it's either a zombie or a highly explosive material.
Well, and that's another good point you bring up, because a lot of people struggle with that. They're like, I'm so used to all of this intensity, the love bombing, the the highs and lows, the making up and then the breaking up, and sometimes the intensity doesn't have making up and breaking up, but a lot of times it does. So the opposite of that intensity can feel really flat and leave a person feeling like you're saying, like, oh, this person's just got no personality, and I can't tell if they're interested in me or whatever, when really they're just not super intense.
Yeah, that moderation kind of doesn't look that inviting sometimes in other people.
I think it depends on how healthy you are.
No, but I'm saying, like, when you walk out from this abusive relationships, the moderation is really boring, and you're like,
Yeah, I would agree. I think for quite a while after an abusive relationship, because when you're so used to, you're just confusing intensity with intimacy and intensity with sincerity. And, if you have like a normal person, if something happens and, I don't know, like you say like, okay, I'm going to go to bed, or I'm done. They don't text, you don't wake up to like 20 text messages and flowers at your front door and them trying to whatever, like apologize or get you back. They're like, oh, okay. Whatever. Or if you say like, oh, I don't want to, I'm going to spend time with my friends this weekend, a normal person's going to be like, oh, okay. Whereas a narcissist can be, who are you with? Are you cheating on me? I need you. I love you. You're everything to me. Call me before you go out. Call me when you get back. And all of
blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
All of that controlling behavior can be mistaken for caring. But when you're far enough out of that, you see it for what it is, and it seriously holds no appeal whatsoever. It's like, oh my God, like this is just it's smothering, it's exhausting, it's immature, it's not, there's no lure, like there's no appeal.
I feel that, you know how sometimes in a chat we have, I mean, we have, because I'm there, I'm like looking at the chat a lot. People asking about what it is to take it slow. I think we have a hard time taking it slow because for us, it's either all in or all out. And that taking it slow will be that being moderate about what I'm gonna do now, how I'm gonna respond, like just being chill.
Either 0 or 100.
Yeah, but we go either 0 or 100.
Well, yeah. I mean, that goes back to, I think, our boundary issues. If we're so used to like, I get real deep with people real fast. Like the old me, I still struggle with this. I do better now, but the old me definitely was like, I'm going to get real deep, real fast. I'm going to totally overshare. My life is an open book. You want to, I would definitely contribute to creating that whirlwind. And if that whirlwind wasn't there, I felt like something was missing. And I felt like anything else was just small talk, which didn't hold my interest. And now I see that that's a problem, and it's not desirable anymore. And so it's like, okay, real intimacy is developed over time. And it changes everything. Like when you start setting the pace and you're able to to be able to share your reality appropriately, moderately with other people.
Yeah.
That book is there's so much in it.
Yeah. Real quick too, she has, she talks about negative control versus positive control. And negative control is either when we're trying to control others or we're allowing others to control us. And our positive control is when we determine our reality. We determine what we think, feel, do, or not do. And she gives an example in the book that I really like because it's so subtle that it would fly under the radar of, I think, the vast majority of people out there. And the example she gives is a guy, his name's Jack. Jack is shoveling bark, like he's mulch in his front yard, shoveling mulch. And his neighbor comes over, probably well-intended, says, "Oh, Jack, you need to sure slow that down. You're going to burn yourself out at the rate you're going." And Jack says, "Oh, you know what? I'm fine. I really enjoy the exercise. Have a good weekend."
Yeah.
And so she points out that the neighbor is trying to exert negative control, whether the neighbor realizes it or not. He probably doesn't realize it, but he's trying to dictate how fast his speed and like how much work he should do. And so it's controlling behavior.
It's like well-intended bad advices.
It's well-intended, but yeah, controlling behavior.
Controlling behavior, yes.
And so Jack did a good job because he was able to maintain positive control over himself, and he was able to use a functioning internal boundary because he was able to reply calmly and still say, "Oh, I've got it. I love the exercise. Have a great weekend." Versus if the negative control had been there, then Jack and a non-functioning internal boundary wasn't present, then Jack might have become angry, defensive, or he might have slowed down his shoveling in order to appease his neighbor. That resonated with me so much. I've seen that. I've been on the receiving end of that kind of stuff for decades. And now that I see it, because before you try to point it out, even to yourself, and it's like, that seems really mild and petty. But that kind of stuff erodes a person over time like crazy. And you start walking on eggshells over something stupid like shoveling mulch.
Yeah.
And
I'm guilty of it at certain times too, though.
Oh, totally.
Not like all the time, all day, every day, unsolicited advice, but I think probably a lot of people in the chat
but we see it. That's the difference.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier about the codependent controlling. So that's that it's the unwanted advice, and it's that knee-jerk reaction in order to take care of other people. "Oh, you really need to slow down to do this. Oh, you know what? I read this great book. You should really read it. Oh, I did this. You should do this too." And it's sort of like, geez, get off my back, And a lot of it's just the way we phrase it. So let's say if you did come up like this book, fantastic book, that if you're excited about it, you're like, man, my friend could really benefit from this, to call them up, and it's changing the approach. Like, I just read the most amazing book. I don't know if you'd be interested in this or not, but it's a book, Pia Melody, Facing Codependence. Absolutely fantastic. Just thought I'd throw that out there. If you want to borrow my copy, you can. But I know you're always looking for a good book, but they have the option of saying yes or no.
It's a subtle difference, but
it's huge, because it gives them right. But it's a subtle difference, but it makes all the difference in the world with because it allows them their autonomy of saying like, oh, thanks for the book recommend, I'm always up for a good book, or oh, it doesn't sound like my cup of tea.
Do you remember how she said that before? When you just share your reality to share your reality, but you don't have an agenda of influencing someone else's reality. I think it was in the last book by her.
Okay.
So it's the same, like, oh, you basically can say, share about the book you've read, and you can say, hey, if you want to know more, it's that and that, but you do not share it to make to influence them to read that book. You just share it because you're excited about reading the book, basically, and learning something new.
Yes. And Sam mentions here, he says, this sounds totally like precisely my former coworkers, so smothering, trying to mother goose me all the time, trying to be all the time the common.
I want to hide now.
Yeah. Well, but I've had people, and I'm sure I've done this too. Like, I had a coworker who would do stuff like this too, and it made me nuts. And I would refer to her as a collie dog, because it was well-intended. She was super friendly, but she would literally just try to herd people and would just run laps. And it was unrelenting to try to get you to do things her way. And so like when Pia Melody talks about the manipulative codependent, I think that's what she's talking about. It's the unrelenting. Oh, you've really got to do this. I know you're going to love this so much. Oh, you just really got to come on. Like, it just doesn't stop.
It's like it's going to make her happy that you will do what she wants you to do, basically, because her worth and whatever is based on that.
I had a boss like that, and he would any little where you should live, how much you should pay, how much, like everything.
Yep.
And it is exhausting.
It is absolutely exhausting.
You're like, dude, stop. This is my life. I got this. It's all right.
Okay, it's also exhausting when you are actually on the other end of it and you actually are doing that. My friends used to call me, yes, mommy, because I would mother them around. Okay, that's what I was hiding. So I was aware of that and I started working on it. But it was exhausting to me too, because I feel like I'm responsible for all my friends.
Well, and that's a great point. And that's the beauty, I think, of when we realize this is where I start and this is where you end, and vice versa, right? Like there's that autonomy, and like each person is just this healthy little like sphere, like we're all these different spheres floating around. It just takes the pressure off of like, oh my goodness, I don't need to sit here and stick around and try to dragging that horse to water. Like, I don't have to do this, and I don't have to be the one dragged to water.
Yeah, you can focus your energy on something positive or something that you can control instead.
Yeah.
You don't have to, like, it's almost like it's not your job to fix someone. It's not your job to guide them. Like, you are like co-traveler. Like, that's how I feel like.
And we just don't have control over it. Like, even if they want to try to make it your job, if they say like, well, I know I can change with a good man or woman by my side, I know it's possible, and I just need you to be there, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, hey, you know what? This is not my circus, not my monkeys, man. Like, you need to go go to therapy, do you, and good luck. But like, I can't, no, like, I'm not going to stand here and go through all that.
Dan DeLeon just had such a great comment. She said, it's same way whenever we survivors encounter somebody in what we perceive to be an abusive relationship, open the door to the information, but don't push them through it. That is so valid, because if you try to push them through it, they may just like stay even longer in an abusive relationship, and it has to be their choice to leave. Yep.
Well, and not only that, and this is a great point. This is something that I really try to watch myself with, like the old me, my old live streams, my old videos. I did feel the need. If somebody was like, well, Dana, what should I do? And, but it was a lot pushier than the new me. And the downside to that is then if any of us are coming across like, yes, I have all the answers for you. First of all, we don't, A, and then B, it cheats them out of the experience of learning how to reclaim their power and realizing that, like you have all of the answers deep inside of you. Like if anything, my role here or our role here is to help you find that, but you do know deep down inside. And so like getting them to just get that power back.
It's like you've said before in live streams, like if you're asking questions, you know the answer, you're just looking for that validation of somebody else agreeing with whatever you think.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I do try to I probably give a much longer answer than people are anticipating, because I want to try to like, let's examine this. Because if we just say like, oh, this flat out, this person's a narcissist, or yes or no, or just very cut or dry things, it's all of the behaviors that term points to, and it's all of the thinking about boundaries and standards and deal breakers that they are missing if we just condense it down to they're a narcissist run.
And it's not really that helpful to them that way.
No. And then if somebody thinks like I have all the answers or somebody else has all the answers, what happens if that person moves or gets hit by a bus?
Yeah.
Right. Like then they're back to square one. So it's like, and I guess it just goes back to like healthy boundary formation in general of like empowering other people instead of, figuring it all out for them. But again, like we don't even have the full context. So us figuring it all out is limited anyhow.
Can I talk a little bit about resentment? Are we not going to talk about it?
You could talk about it. Then let's talk about intimacy and the 7 stages
of feeling
of recovery, or the writing exercise at the end. And then
okay. So I like the resentment. Like I have 2 things to say about resentment, I guess. So I like how she said that resentment, so that need to get revenge for what has been done to you, that can only increase shame, pain, and anger. And it's interesting, I was reading it and I remember I just a couple of days ago listened to this story about 2 monks, and two monks were walking and they met a very big woman that couldn't cross the river. So both of them carried the woman across the river. And then the 2 monks walk away. And while they're walking, one of the monks, it keeps saying, oh my gosh, that woman was so heavy. Oh my God, this woman should lose some weight. Oh my goodness, my back is hurting me. Like walking like this for 5 next miles. And keeps just blaming this woman for everything he's feeling and just remembering all the time. And then finally, he's like, why are you not complaining about the woman? And the other monk says, well, because I picked her up 5 miles ago. I carry her across the river and then I put her down, and I'm not carrying her for the last 5 miles complaining about her. That's why my back is not hurting me. So that was for me, like, I remember how, I don't want to say that I had this whole need to get revenge, but I had this really huge hunger inside of me for justice. Yes. And I was just like waiting for justice to be done because it's unfair, it's unfair, it's unfair, yeah. It's unfair, it's unfair. And it was just like I was on this loop and I couldn't get out from it. And I have to say that I see clearly now how I was just causing more suffering in my life just because I was holding to that. It's resentment.
It ties into you wanting closure, and you're not going to get it from a toxic person.
Nope.
It keeps you from moving on and you healing because you're looking back, waiting for them to give you closure, which is not You'll be waiting forever.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing is how she says that the whole idea of resentment is very and wanting revenge is really immature. It's a sign of immaturity. Like it's keeping us in the fantasy of like something like that. That's how it should be. Like, oh, the fantasy is that if you will get revenge on someone, that it will somehow cancel the pain. That's not true. That's not gonna happen. That's the fantasy. And somehow we are raised in that fantasy that, you know, you can made up for something, but there's no making up for something. You just have to deal with the pain and grow through it and heal it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was like,
yeah. Well, I think anger is a really uncomfortable emotion, and it's one that most of us are not familiar with having. And so when you have such a tremendous, overwhelming amount of anger, when all these relationships end, a person is really kind of inept at how to handle that, because they've never really handled. I mean, if our whole strategy for handling anger and others was people pleasing and ingratiating ourselves and then glossing over and suppressing our own anger, the ending of these relationships, you can't do that. It's so right in front of you. And so I think it's a challenge to learn, like, how do I handle such a tremendous amount of anger, and what do I do with it? And I do think that feelings of like wanting revenge and justice are very normal. I think that's a part of, like, you know, there is such a thing as righteous anger, but I agree with you. Like, I'm thinking that if I can hurt them as much as they hurt me, then I won't be hurt anymore. Like, that's a logical fallacy. Like, that's not accurate. It feels that way, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah. It's illusion. Yeah. I like when later she describes the right, like not the right, but the function of emotions when they are in a healthy way. And anger is this, it gives you the strength you need to do what is necessary to take care of yourself, to assert yourself, to be who you are. Healthy anger is helping you to act in your own best interest.
Yes, and I like that too. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't have that in my notes. She had talked about, you know, and I'm such a huge believer in this, like, our emotions are there because they're signals, they're action signals. And anger is such an important emotion because it lets us know when we need to take some sort of action. There's so much energy in anger. And if we can direct it in a positive direction, it's like rocket fuel, and it can really take a person to the next level. But she also talks about, you know, shame, that there's no, and I think she's so right on. Like, there's no such thing as like bad or good emotions. It's just whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable.
Do you want to read that? I have in my notes the quick messages about the emotion. They'll be quick, and I think it's very valid.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So joy is hope and sense of abundance, and that you are enough. Passion, energy, and motivation to create and survive. Love, sense of warmth for self and another, motivation to treat yourself and others with kindness, and gives you sense of inherited worth. Anger, like I said, is healthy, helping us to act in our best interest and to protect yourself. Fear helps you to protect yourself too. Pain motivates growth, increasing maturity. Normal, healthy life is full of pain-inducing problems. Pain is not equal of suffering. Repressing pain keeps you injured, stops you healing and from maturing. Guilt, there's a healthy guilt, is used to tell you when you have transgressed a value you consider important. Shame gives you a sense of humility and embarrassment and lets you know you have flaws and you are not higher power. So we all fart and burp, and that, you know, we feel shame. So feelings shouldn't be considered as good and bad or as bad. And it's important to know what is the difference between shame and guilt. And if you are raised in a functional, nurturing environment with parents, they will actually teach you that about your feelings. Otherwise, they are being twisted and dysfunctional.
Yes. And I like how we talked about this before too, but like the carried emotions. So if a child is on the receiving end of really strong emotions and they're internalizing that, if a parent is acting in a way that's shameless, like an abuser, if they're not taking any accountability for their behavior, then the child is going to be the one that carries that shame or that guilt for them, thinking that I must be wrong or bad. And
or the secrets, when we play out our parents' secrets, that's crazy for me too. Oh.
So let's go down to the another core factor of codependence is that it basically boils down to if these symptoms, if these core areas don't get in alignment, we have an impaired ability to sustain intimacy, which makes total sense, because if a person doesn't have that a healthy self-love, self-worth, self-protection, self-awareness, all of these things, they're not able to be fully present in their reality. And the only way for us to truly have intimacy with another person, intimacy is that sharing, that authentic sharing of our reality with another person. And so it's learning to get in tune with our self-esteem and our boundaries and our wants and needs, and to be able to assert ourselves and all of it. So she has an exercise here at the end that I thought was really fantastic. And she said to write down, she says, recovery involves facing the existence of less than nurturing experiences in our childhood and then getting the history straight.
Yeah, I love that. So it's a second step. First step, she says you have to just admit that you are codependent. And the second step is you facing all the history of abuse. And I think that is what's supposed to provide you with clarity of what are your feelings now as an adult about your life, and what are all those current feelings from the trauma you have experienced or from your parents that, you know, that they transferred on you. Like, just gaining that clarity. She says it's almost like putting a code into the program that we're just, you know, open something up, and you will be functioning on a different level, basically having.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's awareness, right? Like that's the piece of the puzzle that, you know, so many of us have been missing. So I like how she says that recovery involves facing the existence of less than nurturing experiences in our childhood. So for a lot of people that haven't experienced like horrific abuse or neglect as a child, it can be really confusing because, and she talks about this in these different steps, but if we're not looking at abuse or neglect, we're looking at less than nurturing, because anything that's less than nurturing is going to have negative consequences, and a person can get out of alignment just from less than nurturing. And so this isn't about blaming. It's not about staying stuck. It's not about any of this. It's about it just acknowledging, let's just explore these. We don't have to explore these experiences with judgment. We can explore them with curiosity of kind of what's going on with me now. So once we can acknowledge, boy, you know what? These were some less than nurturing experiences.
Yep.
And then we can start getting the history straight. So we can start seeing the history of this through our functional adult set of eyes, instead of the child, our wounded inner child who might be carrying guilt or shame or trying to be protective of the parent. You know, so like it's wild. It's just so powerful when you start realizing and not minimizing your reality. And we'll go through the steps because this is one of the steps. And I think it's so critical. So number one, she says, look at each year of your life from birth to age 17. Identify any experiences of abuse and who did them to you. I would also add any experiences of less than nurturing parenting, anything that sticks out as significant to you as a significant moment of that you felt embarrassment, shame, guilt, or less than, whether or not they intended it or not.
And start with what you remember, because you don't need to remember everything at once.
Right. And then she says, do not focus on whether the person meant to hurt you or not. And
that's so important to me. I'm sorry.
It is. Yeah. It is. There's a couple of experiences in my life that I oh man, talk about good intentions gone wrong. just real quick, there was a little girl I used to babysit for, obviously 30 years ago. And this was when Chili's or Applebee's started doing that thing where they would come out and they'd sing happy birthday to you. Like restaurants weren't doing, like that was a new thing back in the 80s. And so I convinced my dad, I'm like, I think it'd be so much fun. Like, let's take her out for her birthday and have everybody sing happy birthday to her. And so my intention was that it would be this really fun moment. And this little girl starts crying. She was horrified because all the attention was on her. I felt freaking awful. So like these moments that might have been really pivotal and like, destructive to her, that totally was not my intention at all, but that might have really caused all kinds of weird things. You know what I mean? Like
talking to a mother, do you know how many awkward things I did? They were very, very well intended. I took my daughter one time to the movie that was inappropriate. It was so freaking scary. We had to walk away because she was crying.
What movie was it?
It was like a haunted house, like a cartoon, and I thought it was such a great movie because it was described as funny, but it was scary. And she was like 5 and she was crying.
Yeah, I mean, I think things like that. That's another example of that was when I was a kid, my dad and my brother liked all of the old horror movies and like Bela Lugosi and, the old black and white horror movies. They terrified me and they thought it was so well. And here's an even better, I'll get this. I was terrified as a kid and they would always tease me about it. Well, then fast forward, my brother was probably 9 or 10 and he saw The Blob and he was terrified by that movie, terrified. And my parents, ridiculously terrified. It was fantastic for me because I could crawl along the floor pretending to be the Blob and he would start screaming and crying. But it was awful for him. And and then at one point, my dad explains to him that the Blob is jelly. It's grape jelly. My brother develops this total aversion, fear of grape jelly.
What?
And
fear. Okay, let me make fear of grape jelly.
Yes. So, but
I don't mean to laugh. It's just
these are like more mild things, right? But these things, it's the mild stuff too that can really be traumatic and like it can shape a person. And
does he still hate grape jelly?
I'll have to ask him. He's Mr. Fitness, so he probably hasn't had jellies. He probably hasn't had jelly since he's been 9.
He probably doesn't even have grapes, so grapes are such a high index sugar.
Like avoids the grape jelly aisle in the stores.
He might.
Your poor brother.
I know. What a terrible sister I was. But stuff like that really is, it goes back to like, we thought it was funny. He didn't. And we just kept at it. So like boundary kind of stuff. And then not realizing, I don't know, all of the different ways that things can be really traumatic. Like here's another example that was not intended. So I had a friend of mine that was going to a performing arts school, junior high, maybe high school. I don't even remember. And I really wanted to go with her. Well, I don't do any arts. I don't play an instrument. I don't dance. I don't do art. And for some reason, my mother was like, oh yeah, you should go audition. I had I don't even know, a few piano classes. Needless to say, I did not get in. All of the kids there, of course, were like performing arts students, right? I was horrified, mortified. And everybody was just staring at me like, what are you doing here? Right? Understandably so. Like, I don't think my mom set me up to fail. I just don't think she had any clue as to like what the school was or like what I really needed to do to get in. But that stuck with me like so much, that feeling of just being so, talk about shame and embarrassment, So like all of these little events, well-intended or not, impact us.
How it shapes you.
Gosh, So anyway, so she talks about these different writing down, I would say less than nurturing experiences in general. And then don't focus on whether or not the person meant to hurt you. You can hold these people accountable, but this is not about blame. It's
I
about,
love that.
yes, it's just about acknowledging, like, because sometimes with these events that we're talking about, you know, it can feel like, oh man, like I don't want to be upset with my mom, like she didn't know better, you know, but acknowledging, like, you know what, this was the result of this event, even though she didn't mean for this to happen, like this still really impacted me.
You only validate your own internal work of what happened. That's all you're doing.
Thank you. That's a great way to say that. It's exactly what it is. It's just validating that this happened and it negatively impacted you in some way. And then she says, right? She says, do not compare your past with others. Doing so minimizes your pain. And this is so true, even if a person has gone through horrific abuse, because it's like, oh, you know, they're like, oh, well, I feel really bad. I don't know, something. My father screamed and yelled at us, and then somebody else's father hit them. And then it's sort of like, well, I guess I have nothing to complain about. Like, at least I wasn't getting hit.
Yeah.
Right.
When it's about the same, basically.
Yeah. Pain is pain.
Just comparing it.
Yeah.
Pain is pain, and seeing it for what it is and just acknowledging it, you know, I mean, yeah. And then she says, then describe the behavior in terms of functional or dysfunctional instead of good, bad, right, wrong. So, and then focus on what happened to you in terms of your caregivers, not in terms of you being a caregiver.
That was a good thing for me because I was so guilt tripping myself in this book.
Yeah, I think it's good to focus on down the road, like the ways that this behavior's come out onto our children so we can acknowledge it and validate it. But I do think they learn by example the best, and it's more helpful if we can stop what we're doing. I shouldn't say, if we can get more into alignment with ourselves.
If I guilt trip myself about that, what I'm gonna do is just induce more guilt on my daughter, basically.
Right. It doesn't solve anything.
Yeah, it's not gonna solve anything. Yep.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, I guess that was pretty much
now I'm just gonna go back to why blaming is not really working. And she just picture like blaming is like putting your handcuffs. It's like handcuffing yourself to your abuser. So if you're blaming the abuser, you're actually giving them control over your life. You're giving them power. And that's why this exercise is focused on you just validating your own experience of what happened for you so we can move on. You want to use it to work and free yourself from those negative experiences.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you know, I think understanding like how to actually function, you know, process emotions and to move forward from, again, this stuff is not talked about, like how to move forward from it, how to heal from it, what it is, like none of this is talked about. And so I think if a person feels like they did this to me, right? Like they're feeling those feelings of blame, or they're feeling like they want revenge. I think so many of these are totally normal feelings until a person learns, like, because that's such an awful, I don't think anybody wants to be caught up in like blame or revenge mode because it is so powerless. But I think it's like they don't know what else to do. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do with all of this anger? Like, this happened to me. This person violated me. They abused me. I don't want this to rule my life, but I don't know how to make it stop, you know? And so understanding that instead of blame, like the next step, like we can acknowledge it. Yes, what happened to you was not right, and it was not fair, and it was disgusting, and it was wrong on every level. And it's okay to feel how you feel. But we can take this, and instead of staying there in blame, we can take this and use this as a building block to validate your pain. And now there is life after this. Like we can start moving past this and acknowledging, like, how did this event truly impact me on all of these different levels, and starting to work through these different levels so you can get back into that alignment with your healthy self, so you can move forward and live a good life.
Oh yeah. And just just if you get yourself that validation, you know, first you start with yourself validating your experience, then you can have a therapist validate your experience or some closer friends.
Yeah.
That will remove lots of anger, because lots of anger comes from no one sees it, no one protected me, no one gets it, no one understands me. Like when you are so alone in your own experience and you feel that even having that experience is being wronged by other people, that's main cause for the anger. So
Yeah.
get that validation, give it to yourself first. And I mean, I don't want to say that I'm grateful for being abused in my past, but the crazy thing here is that I'm sort of am, because what I am right now, it's like I really embrace my whole life. Like I wouldn't change anything in my life. And like I don't want to say I'm grateful for it, but I'm okay with everything that happened because I used it to really grow. And Pia says in this book, and I think in other books too, how, you know, if you grow through your pain and you actually get to this place when you start feeling perfectly imperfect, and there is like this pain and joy are really connected together, and you're really discovering your, like, the intimate connection with yourself, with your higher power or God or whatever, or the universe, if you or I don't know what's the equivalent of that in a Buddhist. I don't know that. Peace maybe, I don't know, but you really can experience this wonderful awareness of being this wonderful human. And I don't know, I just think that's just such a great place to be at. Like dealing,
Yeah.
I rather deal with codependency that never go through it and never really experience, you know, the true awareness of being alive. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
And it shapes who you are as a person. And I think that's cool when it makes you unique.
Yeah.
And it's that doorway that opens. I think that's the beauty and the power of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Is that's the power of rock bottom. Like that's just it's almost I really view that pain of rock bottom as like a sacred space that
Mm-hmm.
we're only at a few times in life. And there's so much awareness. It's like the pain of rock bottom allows us to question things and to start doing things different. And I really feel like if people don't have that pain of rock bottom, of having their whole life blown apart, I think a lot of people just go through life with lives of kind of this quiet desperation. Like I think it was Henry Thoreau said once, but when you have things so shaken up, you're like, oh my gosh, you start questioning everything. And you're like, oh my gosh, like it was my family I got a bunch of messed up messages from them, and then from society, and then from all kinds of people. And you start questioning everything and reintegrating everything into yourself and into a way that this new cohesive whole is so much stronger and wiser than before. And when you get to that place, I think I agree with you, Healthy Love. Like, you're like, oh my goodness, I would have never gotten here had I not experienced so much pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
You know how there's no pain, no gain t-shirts? I almost want to say no pain, no growth. Like,
I love that.
I think you should totally do
I was like,
that.
I think you should totally do
Like
that.
a painting, and then you can put it on a shirt.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. I want to do a shirt. No pain, no growth. Like, seriously.
I
There
will
we go.
order. Well, James and I are going to order some from you.
I would totally order at least 5
Well, girl,
off of Amazon Prime. If it's not on Amazon Prime, I'm not ordering.
It's not happening. Yeah.
That's the only way.
Dana needs to put on Amazon Prime.
I do. I love that because it is so
Yeah.
absolutely right on. And I think and then the cool thing too is I think when a person does get to this level where they start, and Pia Melody talks about this too with healing, is it's not such a cut and dry line. It's
No.
we're in recovery when we're practicing different ways of being, when we're practicing a more solid state of self-esteem, being more moderate, having healthier boundaries. Then we're coming from a place of recovery, and then there's going to be times where we slip into our old ways of being, and then we're not in recovery. We're acting out these kind of codependent habits, and we go back and forth, and it's just kind of this imperfect journey into self-actualization and into this healthy life. And it's just so cool. Like, cause then you start, I mean, my goodness, like one of the biggest kicks I get out of this whole channel is you just start meeting all of these other like fellow travelers on the path.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, where have you guys been all my life? Like, it's just,
I feel the same way.
it's so cool.
My
like,
two
did
best
YouTube
friends,
exist whenever this was like first started, or? Yeah.
It would have been nice if
I know
the internet or any of this would have existed.
Saved a lot of money,
right?
Well, I think my healing would be on completely different level if I had access to community like this when I was just dealing with it. Because it's been like what 6-7 years or 8, almost 8 years alone basically, and not being validated, so I get all the anger and stuff. But when you when you're starting finding yourself more on that other side of it, like even just having those moments, embrace it, because you're gonna have more and more and more of those moments. And
yeah, and I think you almost get used to living your life in the state of like perpetual introspection and growth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I was saying earlier, like I had this aha moment yesterday about, oh my gosh, like I feel like I didn't realize perfectionism had been such a driving force in my life. I wasn't concerned about doing things perfect. I was just concerned about doing them right. And I wasn't even thinking I was doing them right, or a fear of failure and stuff. And like you have these realizations that come up, and it just really kind of scrambles your worldview again, because you all of a sudden all the pieces rearrange. And but it's so powerful, and you have these aha moments, and then once you have them, you can't unhave them, and your life is forever changed, and you just kind of level up, and you're like, oh my goodness, I see so much of my problematic behavior clearly, and now that I am in tune with it, I can actually start doing something differently about it, instead of just feeling anxious and depressed and not knowing why, or misdirecting it and thinking, oh, it's because of I just need better workflow or time management. And it's like, no, that's not it.
Nope.
You know?
No, it's so since we're not gonna have Pia Melody next book, maybe for a while we're not gonna talk about her. Let me just say my favorite thing about Pia Melody books.
Yes.
It's that she really connects that spirituality, and like the way she explains. Oh my goodness. It's like I feel so special being a human being after reading Pia's book, because I feel all those different dimensions of me, like my feelings, and like there is almost this magic that I can feel someone else's feelings when they're trying to hide them from me, or like I'm living up my mother's secret that she hid from me. Like I felt how freaking wonderfully human are that that's a fact. Like this is happening. Like in the past I would think like, oh no way, like I live my life, I made the wrong decisions, I'm responsible for all of that. But now, like I was sharing with my friend today on the phone, like I literally lived my mother's secret. I did exactly what my mother was hiding from me, exactly. Like it was just like, if you put those two stories next to each other, it's like they would be so freaking aligned. And I was like, wow, Pia really discovered all those different dimensions about being human. The spirituality, your emotions, and the boundaries, and that there's just so like, and why the boundaries are so important, because you are more than here. This is like, you have to know where you end and when you start and begin. Actually, you have to know what you are responsible for. You have to know how you hold yourself, because you are connected. You are so connected with every other human being. You can feel their emotion. You can leave their secrets. They can leave your secrets. So you really want to be this our human being, because there's just so much more at stake than just you, basically.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing.
I've always been a big fan of like the purpose of life is to grow.
Yeah.
It's to evolve, right? Like that's what we're all doing. All these different species are doing. And as humans, it's our job to basically like run the ball down the field, and we each have our own kind of special song that we sing. So everybody's running their ball down the field in their own certain area. And it's just about becoming like the highest and best version of yourself, not what society tells you to be, not what your parents tell you to be, not any of that. Like really getting in tune with like who you are and in expressing that in the highest and best way.
I went Polish.
You did. You would get real close and then like back up. It was awesome though. It really drives the point. It's not a bad thing.
Someone says they dying to read Pia book Melody. Those books are good, but they are pretty difficult. Like I read them within the last few days because I couldn't get this freaking book on time. So it was too much for me. Like, and there's so much gold in it. I don't think we are able to pull out like 50% out of it today.
I agree. There's so much.
So much.
These books, and just to be clear for people that are fresh out of this, or you're kind of beginning to explore all of this, this is not to say that you are somehow responsible for what happened, that you're responsible for the abuse, that you could have changed things, that even though we're talking about codependent behavior and kind of being out of alignment and these kinds of things, it's please know that you didn't cause or do anything that happened to you. So this is about becoming like the the healthiest version of us, and to stop getting tangled up with abusers and learning how to see this stuff for what it is.
Well, when it's about owning your part and then kind of moving on from it and start.
Yeah.
It's also not a good book for people that are fresh out or still.
No, please do not do it to yourself.
Triggering.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, and it's okay. Like, and this is a book, if you are fresh out and you're just needing that validation component. I think there's definitely a time and place for being angry, for being hurt, and for feeling victimized. Like, it's okay. Like, if that's where you are, that's where you are. And in time, when you're ready to explore like healthy boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, and all of this, I would encourage you to read this book at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it might even.
I feel like most people would have a good sense of like when they're ready to jump into it.
Yeah, because I don't think I would have sought out a book like that. It would have taken me a handful of years.
Yeah.
To get to the place where I was ready to even be open to this. I just did not understand how my boundary standards or deal breakers played into any of what I got involved with.
I didn't know what boundaries are. I'm sorry.
And for me, I spent so much time reading like all kind of books about toxic people and narcissists and stuff that I didn't even really hear the word codependent until I don't even remember, like months later.
I couldn't read nothing. My brain was not functioning for me to read anything at some point. And
because you're still dealing with the
CPTSD or whatever we call that. Yeah.
Cognitive dissonance. Is that what
no, I was dealing with psychotic breakdown first. Like, I didn't know what my name was, so I couldn't read anything, to be honest with you.
Wow. The
first thing I read, in all honesty, was the freaking Bible. And I just read like Psalms because that was just to.
It's a good place to start.
It is a good place to start.
Yeah. And I was listening to Joyce Meyer. I remember that. That's like easy, very easy stuff I was doing. Yeah.
I like her because she's like Pia Melody. She's pretty direct.
They even look the same.
They even kind of do. I agree.
Yeah. I was like, they kind of look the same. Yeah.
I have to disagree with that, but it's okay.
Well, they both, I think, have that kind of no nonsense look about them. And they both strike me as very strong women. And the codependency thing for me, I didn't identify with it because I had holes in my boundaries. And it's not like I didn't have any boundaries. So I was like, I don't see how this doesn't apply to me.
Could you even say that then? Like, isn't that just now in a hindsight? Because I honestly, I didn't know I had any problem with boundaries because boundaries was like non-existent conversation, like idea to me.
You don't know what you don't know. So it's like, you never had them to miss them. So it's kind of, it makes it difficult.
I mean, I guess like I used to teach this stuff. So I knew about boundaries and I knew about.
They didn't teach me that on my university.
Well, I learned all of this when I was working. I mean, my mom has always been a huge fan of therapy. We were in and out of therapy for decades. And so when they divorced, we went through a lot of therapy. And so there was talk, but I don't think I even gained anything out of all that, to be honest with you. It was nice to talk to somebody, but outside of like the psychoeducational component, I didn't get. It really wasn't until I was working at the domestic violence shelter and like having to teach structured classes on a wide variety of topics that I understood this. But even still, like
Well,
I
it
could
just
only
goes to
teach.
show how covert it can be.
Oh, totally. And you can only teach something from your point of understanding.
Right.
So like I didn't have, there were holes in my knowledge and there were holes in my own, obviously my own application of that knowledge. And so, yeah, it was a horrifying feeling on many different levels to realize like I've only been teaching 20% of what people, not even that, probably closer to 5% of what people actually need in order to learn this stuff. Because PM Melody just nails it. It really is these different areas and like learning how to be self-protective and boundaries. So I had always thought about boundaries in terms of like being assertive and saying no. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of like self-protection and like walking away from situations that aren't nourishing, or especially if they're abusive or cause you all kinds of mental anguish, you know?
For me, but like the whole idea of the boundary that I only like react to the opinions or feelings or whatever, or words that are true to me, like, you know, that I can be selective.
Yes,
That
that's
I was
huge.
like, that is boundary. Like, I had no idea. I thought I have to take in everything that people were telling me, and that if I have, and if I don't, that means I'm not a sensitive person. That's what I thought.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting about that one. Like I very distinctly, I was working at a youth home. This was 20 something years ago. And there was a gal there that had been molested by her high school coach. And he had molested a lot of girls. And anyways, she was getting teased by other kids about what had happened. And about her parents were hippies, and like kids were teasing her about her family and all kinds of stuff. And I remember having a discussion with her because I thought it was so strange that she was just accepting everything that they were saying. And I couldn't understand that at the time because I was like, well, but what they're saying isn't accurate. Like, that's not true. Like, that's not what happened. That's not who you are. That's not who your family is. Like, they're wrong. Like, you don't need to own any of that. But it was just because they'd said it, she totally internalized it. And it was all of a sudden her truth. And then reading this book, so fast forward 20 something years, right? Reading this book, and it's like, oh my gosh, because I don't think I necessarily had that issue. And so then seeing, oh my gosh, there's people out there that when other people say ugly, awful, hurtful things, they totally internalize it and accept it as truth. So that was really eye-opening for me. And I think that'll help me to do what I do. So
How are we gonna end this? Because there's so much to find.
I know. Well, I think we should just end it because we're going on
3 hours. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Just end this, end that.
Yes. Well, okay. So let's recap the book. The book next month is going to be The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion by Christopher Gerner, I believe. And yes, that's the book. So book club is the last Thursday of every month, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope that you guys join us. I'll be posting my notes on this book here within like the next week. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Thank you, James, Healthy Love. I really appreciate all of your input and everything. Just was awesome.
Thank you for letting us join you.
And very enjoyable. So
Okay, I have to see my art behind you.
Yes. Lots of love to you. You're not alone. You are not crazy, and you can move forward and heal from this. So take care. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Trace, you the best.
Yes.
Cute.